Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa mawala. Inna alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah wahdahu la sharika lahu ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة صدق الله مولانا العظيم اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Alhamdulillah, we are discussing the Fiqh of Salah, and last time when we had a discussion in relation to the Fiqh of Salah, we discussed the conditions of Salah, the Shara'it of Salah. And in today's session, we will be discussing the last two parts of the conditions that we still needed to speak about, and the second condition that we still have to speak about is actually also the first fard. And the main topic of today is the fard acts and the wajib acts of the salah, meaning those actions that if they are not done, the salah is completely invalid, and the wajib acts that if they are not done, then the salah is incomplete. And some of these can be covered by the performance of sajdatul sahw, whilst others require the salah to be repeated. So we mentioned last time the first few conditions in detail of salah, which include tahara, purity, sitrul awra, covering the body parts, and along with sitrul awra, we discussed the condition of istiqbal al-qibla, facing the qibla, and the condition of waqt, of timing. And after that, we have the conditions of niyyah and of takbir al-tahrima remaining. So in terms of the niyyah, the intention, this means the firm intention that is in the heart of a person. It's not necessary to say the intention with your lips, to say words that denote the intention, but making intention, the intention is actually the action of the heart. So what is in your heart is the intention. The minimum level that's required is that if somebody asks you what you are doing, you are immediately able to answer which salah you are performing. If you have to think about which salah you are performing, then your intention is not there. So for the intention has to include whether the salah you are performing is fard or not. So if the intention that you make does not make clear that you are performing the fard salah, then this will not be enough for the salah to be valid. So for example, if you are performing the fard rak'ats, the farida rak'ats of zuhr, then you have to make the intention that I am performing the fard rakats of today's zuhr. This has to be in the heart. For nawafil, a general intention is fine. So if you are performing voluntary prayers, and you just make general intention of performing salah, then that is enough. But in relation to Taraweeh especially, one should be careful and make intention of Taraweeh, because it is a emphasized sunnah. And some scholars consider a general intention not to be enough for a sunnah salah. To say that I'm facing the Qibla in intention or to have it in your heart is not part of the condition, but it is a habit of many people to say this, and that's fine, but it's not a condition for you to specify that you're facing the Qibla. Whilst being behind an Imam, the Muqtadi should make the follower should make the intention that I am following the Imam, and it is possible for him to simply say that I am performing the same salah that the Imam is offering. Just as it is necessary to make the intention for a fard salah and make clear that you're performing a fard salah, the fard rakats, for example, of Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr. In the same way, if you're performing a wajib salah, a salah that is obligatory, then it's also important to make clear that you intend to perform the obligatory salah. Including in that are the salahs of Eid, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, and the salah of a vow. So if you made a vow that if I succeed in such and such, then I will perform salah, then that salah is nadhr, is manzur, and that manzur salah that you are performing, you will have to make intention and make it clear in your intention that you are performing this wajib salah. Including in the wajib salah is the performance of the rakats after tawaf, the wajib tawaf, and so in them you have to specify that you are intending to perform the wajib tawaf. In the same way, if a person started a nafil salah and then invalidated that nafil salah, it's now necessary for them to read that nafil salah and complete it. And when they make the intention for that nafil salah, when they're repeating it again, then they will have to make intention of that, because it is then wajib for them to complete that salah that they started. So these are the explanations in relation to the condition of intention. Takbir al-Tahrima is to say Allahu Akbar at the beginning of Salah. The first takbir, the first Allahu Akbar is necessary, and inshallah we're going to discuss this in our coming discussion about the faraid of Salah further. There are 7 fard of Salah. So these are things that everyone should basically know. So the conditions that we discussed were 6, and everybody should know them. And as we mentioned last time, there's a systematic way of understanding them. That you would purify yourself, so you have tahara, then you're covering your body, sitrul awra. Then when you're intending, you're going to face the qibla, so istiqbalul qibla. You're going to make sure the timing is there, so waqt. And then you're going to make the intention for the salah. And then when you made the intention, you're going to recite Allahu Akbar. So you're going to do takbir al-tahrima. Now, because takbir al-tahrima, a condition is that, a shart is that which is not part of the salah itself, it's not inside the salah, it's not an action within salah, it's an external factor that has to be there. So because takbir tahrima in one way is external to salah, is included in the conditions, and on the other hand, it is inside salah as it's entering a person into salah, and therefore it is fard as well. So there are 7 faraid of salah. The first of which is takbir tahrima. Tahrima means to make haram, and here is referring to making those things haram upon yourself that would otherwise be permissible by performing salah. So you are making haram upon yourself to speak, you are making haram upon yourself to eat, and you are firmly entering into salah. So takbir tahrima. And the spiritual point here that when you are performing the salah, you are starting salah, you are putting everything else behind you when you are reciting this takbir, and you are cutting yourself off from everything else. This takbir is also known as the first takbir, right? Because it's the first, it's the first one to be recited, and famously known as takbir tahrima. It's important that takbir tahrima involves the mentioning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness. So that is what is takbir tahrima. And you will, you obviously will be aware that takbir Allahu Akbar is recited at numerous times within the salah. But this takbir tahrima refers to the first recitation of Allahu Akbar. And the fourth aspect is that Allah's greatness be mentioned. And inshallah, when we discuss the the wajibat, we'll understand which specific words have to be mentioned. When behind an imam, a person should be careful to perform every action after the imam, following the imam, and not preceding the imam. We should not do any action before the imam. But this is especially important when starting the salah with takbir tahrima. For example, the follower starts the word Allah of the takbir tahrima with the imam, but he says Akbar before the imam says the word, then this person's salah will not be valid. He will not be classed as being behind the imam. In the same way, the takbir tahrima, when it's recited when a person joins the imam and the imam is in ruku, it's important that the takbir tahrima is recited while standing up. So what a person should do is stand straight up and say Allahu Akbar, and then recite another Allahu Akbar to go into ruku, another takbir to go into ruku. Because people are aware that if they find the imam in ruku, they have found the rak'ah, and if they miss the ruku, they miss the rak'ah. Many people rush at this point, and they say Allahu Akbar going down, and this will mean that the salah is not valid. So therefore, they should say Allahu Akbar standing up, and then say another takbir to go into ruku. If a person is unable to speak because of illness, then that person who suffers from speech difficulties, who can't speak, he does not have to say Allahu Akbar because he can't speak, he can't say anything. Then his intention in his heart is enough for him. And in the same way, her intention, if it's a sister, is enough for her. Just as it's important to recite the words Allahu Akbar, it's also important that the words are pronounced correctly. So a person should be careful to pronounce the words in the correct manner. For example, the Hamza on Allah at the beginning, if that is stretched and the person says Allah, then this will make this will mean that the salah is not valid, because instead of saying Allah is the greatest, by saying Allahu Akbar, they have changed the meaning and they are now asking if Allah is the greatest, ma'adallah. In the same way, some people say Akbar, Akbar, and this is also the incorrect pronunciation, which distorts the meaning. So it's important that we learn how to pronounce each and every word that we recite in salah correctly. And for that is tajweed and the importance of tajweed. Alhamdulillah, on the um, sessions that we have online, we also have the sessions of tajweed. So it's important for brothers and sisters to take benefit from that, but also to practice with somebody who is aware of the rules of tajweed. Because one thing is listening to the rules and listening to a person who's able to recite, and another thing is ironing out your own mistakes. I did mention this last time as well, and this will be coming up further in discussion when we reach one of the other important aspects, fard aspects of salah. So this was the first condition, and the second this first fard action of salah. So if you like, some books describe them as arkan as well. They are the pillars of salah. So first of all, you had the conditions before entering into salah, and now you have these pillars. If any one of these pillars is not there, then the salah is completely invalid. So the first of those is to recite Allahu Akbar correctly. Then we have the second pillar and the second fard action of salah, which is to stand up. Right? So standing is fard, and inshallah we'll discuss where it is fard. In which rakats is it fard? But what is standing? Standing, the bare minimum level of standing, this standing in Arabic is called qiyam. And the bare minimum of it is that if a person stretches out their hands, the hands do not reach the knees. The complete qiyam, the complete standing, is to stand straight up, right? To stand with a straight back and fully stand. In terms of how long it is necessary to stand, the amount of time that is necessary to stand is the same as the amount of recitation that is necessary. So the necessary amount of recitation that we're going to be discussing in the third, what we'll describe as pillar of salah, the recitation of the Holy Quran. So how much is fard? That amount of time standing is also fard. How much is wajib? That amount is also wajib to stand. And how much is sunnah? That amount is sunnah to stand. So standing is necessary for all the fard rakats, and it is necessary for all the wajib rakats, such as witr and the Eidain. And in the same way, the two sunnahs of fajr, because they are more emphasized than any other sunnah rakats. If anyone offered any of these rakats sitting down without a valid reason, then their salah will not be valid. So it's important to understand that standing is fard, is a necessary aspect in salah, especially in these rakats. And some people decide to sit down based upon the slightest of pain, right? And without having a valid reason. So it's important to understand when is it that a person is forgiven from standing in salah. If a person is unable to physically perform sajda, then they are forgiven from standing. Standing qiyam is only fard upon those who can physically go down into prostration and perform sajda. So those who are not able to physically go down, they are able to bend down into sajda, they are then permitted to sit down. A person who finds that if they stand up, then the wound will bleed, or similarly, if they go into sajda, their wound will bleed. So many people who have operations find themselves in this situation. Or a person finds that if they stand up or they perform sajda, then their wudu is invalidated. For example, the urine is released, and if they don't stand up, then this issue does not occur. Or if they don't go into sajda physically, this does not occur. A person is able to stand, but standing up will result in their illness becoming worse, then they are also permitted to sit down. If a person finds that they can stand up, but they would have to lean against something, then it'll be fard, it'll be necessary for them to stand up, leaning against, for example, a stick or crutches, or leaning against a wall, or leaning against a pillar, or even leaning against a person. So if they can perform salah standing up, leaning against something, then they still have to stand up. If it's possible to just recite Allahu Akbar, the Takbir al-Tahrima standing up, it is fard to recite the Takbir al-Tahrima standing up, and then the person will be permitted to sit down if he cannot manage to perform the rest of the salah standing up. But it should be remembered that, as we discussed earlier, the fardiyah of standing, then it being necessary to stand, is linked to the ability to perform sajda physically. So if a person is unable to physically perform sajda, he is forgiven from standing up. Now, if a person is unable to stand up, how should they sit down? The first option should be to try and sit down on the floor if possible. If the person is able to sit down as they would sit in Qa'dah, then that's how they should sit. When they're sitting down in Salah normally, if they are able to sit down like that, then they should sit like that. Otherwise, in any way possible on the floor, they should sit down. But if the situation is that they cannot bend down and sit down on the floor, which does occur in many situations, then that person will be permitted to perform Salah on a chair. When the person is performing Salah on a chair, they will then signal for sujood and ruku. There will not be a need for a table to be put in front of them so that they perform sajda on the table, putting their forehead and their nose on the table, but rather they will lower their head a bit for ruku and a bit more down for sajda. In the same way, anybody who's unable to perform sajda physically, they will signal for sajda and they will signal for ruku, making this signal for sujood more than the signal for ruku. It's important to understand the situations when a person can sit down. Because unfortunately, we have situations where people are able to do sajda and they are also able to stand. Because they have some slight issues, they think that they are able to sit down and perform salah on a chair. They should be very careful in this regard and ensure that they are actually exempt And on the other hand, those who are, suffering from such illnesses, they should not feel um, in any way hesitant to perform salah in accordance to the teachings, and they should not feel overburdened to do something that's out of their capacity. So the first condition, the first pillar, the first fard of salah was takbir al-tahrima, and the second is qiyam, to stand, and the third that we're discussing now is qira'ah, is recitation of the Holy Quran. And what is qira'ah? It means to pronounce every letter from the correct makhraj, from the correct place where it's to be pronounced from, in such a way that each letter is distinct from the other. So it's fard for the recitation to be in such a way that the letters are differentiated, especially those letters that sound similar. Because if they are not differentiated, then the salah will become invalid if the meanings are distorted. And this is the view of the great fuqaha and scholars of fiqh. What is recitation? Recitation is that a person read in such a way that they can at least hear their own voice when reciting. So if you can't hear your own voice and you're just mumbling, then that is not recitation. So some people are just moving their lips. And they are not taking out the letters from their correct places. Then that is not recitation. That is mumbling. Some people are just engrossed in thought. They are thinking and they're imagining the words, but they're not pronouncing them. Then that again is not recitation. So some people are able to recite correctly, but they end up doing this. So even then the salah will not be valid. So in order for it to be valid, first of all, they have to pronounce correctly the letters. And secondly, they have to come out from along with being recited properly, they have to be uttered in such a way that at least the person who's reading is able to hear them, unless he's in such a noisy area that it's not possible for him to hear himself due to the loud noise all around. If that loud noise was not there, then he would be able to hear himself, or she would be able to hear herself, and that is enough. How much recitation is fard in salah? In the Hanafi madhab, to recite at least one ayah is fard. So to at least read one ayah of the Holy Quran is fard in the two rakat of a fard salah, in the first two rakat of a fard salah, and in every single rakat of all other salahs, such as witr, the sunan, and the nawafil. So the only rakats in which recitation of at least one ayah is not fard are the third and the fourth rakats of the fard rakats, or the third rakat of, for example, of the Maghrib salah. So meaning anything after the second rakats of the fard rakats, in those rakats you do not have to recite the Holy Quran. It's not fard to do so. Now it's fard to recite at least one ayah of the Holy Quran in all other rakats. This does not mean that it's not important to read Surah Al-Fatiha and that it's not important to read a surah along with it. And that will be inshallah discussed when we discuss the wajibat of salah. What is wajib in salah? When reading behind an imam, The recitation of the Imam in light of the ahadith is enough for the recitation of the follower, and therefore the follower does not recite the Holy Quran behind the Imam. So whatever comes from the Holy Quran, only the Imam recites and not the follower. If someone did, if someone recited the Holy Quran in only one rak'ah of Fard Salah, for example, and he did not recite the Holy Quran in the second rak'ah, then his Salah will be invalid. Because as we mentioned earlier, it's fard to recite the Holy Quran, at least one ayah of the Holy Quran in every single rak'ah of every single Salah, apart from the third and or fourth of the fard rakats. When reciting the Holy Quran, it should be done so with tartil, with the correct pronunciation and calmly. In the fard salah, it should be very slow and calm, and a in salah such as Taraweeh, it should be in a medium pace, and in the nawafil of the night, you are permitted to recite a bit faster. But fast in our community, the understanding of fast is distortion of the recitation of the Holy Quran, ma'adallah. And therefore, this understanding of slow, medium, and fast is not according to the modern times, but rather is in accordance to the true teachings of our Master Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even if a person is reading fast, the elongation where there's a need for elongation, which are called the maddul asli, the maddatul asliya, there the mad should be made. The elongation should be done, right? At least the bare minimum that's required of elongation should be done, because otherwise, if you don't lengthen where there's a need to lengthen, then it will be haram to read the Holy Quran in such a way, because the Holy Quran commands us to read the Quran with tartil, which is calmly. Especially in Taraweeh, there is an atmosphere of reading the Holy Quran in such a way that not even the length, the minimum length of mud is kept, but let alone that, in many places, the correct pronunciation of the letters is completely out of the window. And the only words that can be understood from the reciter are very few, if any. Reading the Holy Quran in such a way is haram. And these are the words of Sadr al-Sharia, Badr al-Tariqa, Mawlana Amjad Ali Azmi rahimahullah ta'ala, in his Bahari Shariat, that he says that even worse, they boast about, amongst others, about the speed of their recitation. So not only do they commit haram by reading the Quran wrong and reading it fast to such an extent that the words are distorted, but they are actually proud of the fact that they are reading the Quran at such a speed. And he says that it's strictly haram to recite the Quran in such a way. And he, rahimahullah ta'ala, also mentioned that due to people reciting the Holy Quran in such a way, he was deprived of reading Taraweeh behind the Huffaz of the Quran for many years. That he was not able to read Taraweeh behind a person who completed the Holy Quran in Taraweeh, because of the fact that they did not differentiate between the letters in their recitation, and they were reading the Quran in a haram way. So that was in relation to Taraweeh. Unfortunately, many of our members of public do not know how to pronounce the letters of the Holy Quran in the correct manner. And most of them are unable to distinguish between the sounds of letters that sound similar, such as ta and ta, right? And seen and sod and tha, and the huruf halqiyya, the letters that are pronounced from the throat. For example, the three has, the one that's pronounced from the bottom is ha, The one that's pronounced from the middle is ha. The one that's pronounced from the top is kha. In the same way, they're not able to differentiate between hamza and ain, right? And they're not differentiating between dal and dod and dal and dha. So because they're not able to differentiate between these letters, they are deprived of being able to recite the Quran in the correct manner to such an extent that their salah would be valid. And that's why it's fard for them, it's necessary for them to learn tajweed to this extent, right? That they are able to correctly pronounce the letters of the Holy Quran. So it should be remembered that if the meaning of the word becomes distorted as a result of the letters being mispronounced, then salah will not be valid. And we have to realize that mispronunciation of letters does lead to the distortion in meaning. The famous example of this is kalb and qalb, right? So kalb means dog and qalb means heart. So if you're pronouncing those kafs in the same way, then you are mispronouncing the words to an extent that you're changing the meaning. If someone is unable to pronounce azim correctly in the ruku, because the dha there is one of the hard letters to pronounce, it's important to learn how to pronounce that, right? So you're pronouncing this from the top of the tongue and the inner edges of the upper front teeth, the dha. But many people are not pronouncing it from there, and they're pronouncing it as they would pronounce Z. So they're pronouncing the za and the dha in the same way. This is wrong, and therefore they should instead recite Subhana Rabbiyal Kareem, which is a bit easier for many, until they manage to pronounce the words of Subhana Rabbiyal Azim in the correct manner. And this is because of the distortion of the meaning that the salah would become invalid if they pronounce the Azim incorrectly. It's important to remember that little practice is not enough for a person to be able to pronounce letters correctly. It will require hard work during the night and day. So you'll have to work really hard to get the pronunciations correct, right? And small children, alhamdulillah, they will manage to catch the pronunciations quicker. But those who have spent many years reading the Quran differently, it will take them time, and it will require time for them to correct their pronunciation. So many people give up immediately because of the fact that it requires time. But they have to remember that this is necessary for them to do. And the other beauty is that if they are working hard to correct themselves, then inshallah, as long as they are working hard, they'll be forgiven for their shortcomings. So during the learning period, your salah will be valid because you're learning. But if you're not learning at all, you're not even trying to learn, then you're leaving your salah in a situation that is invalid. So it's important to work hard and to try to pronounce the words correctly, and therefore it should be that we are seeing more and more people finding teachers to teach them the Holy Quran with the correct pronunciation. If a person works hard night and day, but still finds that he's mispronouncing the words, or a sister tries hard night and day, but they're still finding it hard to pronounce it correctly, and they're still mispronouncing words, then they should still carry on trying, and they'll be forgiven, they'll be excused during this time. Their salah will be valid, but they should not become the imam leading salah of others who can recite correctly. And in the hadith is mentioned that the one who tries to read the Holy Quran and stutters and finds it difficult will be given two rewards: the reward of reciting and the reward of struggling and trying. So it's important to try, and inshallah, you'll be given even more reward for your efforts. This was the condition or the pillar of salah, the qira'ah and the recitation. So far we've covered three of the important aspects of salah: takbir al-tahrima, qiyam and qira'ah. If there is a shortcoming in any of these, if these are missed, then the salah will be completely invalid. And the fourth pillar is ruku. And the other point about this is that all these things you will realize that there's no difference in the schools, the Hanafi, the Maliki, the Shafi'i and the Hanbali. There's no difference in these because these are the core, right? So everyone accepts their existence and their importance, right? The differences then occur about the inner details. If you're reading Salah with a Shafi'i, he will still be performing ruku, he will still do qira'ah, he will still do takbir tahrim at the beginning, right? And he'll still do all of these other actions that we're mentioning. The differences are then in relation to, for example, what's wajib and what's not wajib, and in the same way, how we interpret what is necessary and to what extent they are necessary. But those are details that the students of Al-Markaz Islami understand within our classes, and as Hanafis, they understand how the Hanafi position is established, where the proof is taken for the Hanafi madhab from the Quran and Sunnah, and how Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala derived his rulings. Ruku, the least level of ruku. So this fourth fard of salah is ruku, and the least level of ruku is to bend down to such an extent that if the hands are stretched, they reach the knees. And the complete ruku is for the back to be straight, to be horizontally straight. And then we have the fifth pillar of salah, which is sujood. And both sujood are found in each rakat. So each of the sajdas are necessary in each rakat. So after the ruku is sajda, which is fard. Now it doesn't mean that after ruku we immediately go into sajda. So we do stand up for Sami Allahu liman hamida, which is called the qawma. But the qawma is not fard. It's wajib, and inshallah we'll be discussing it in the wajib actions of salah, those actions which are obligatory in salah. It's mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in Sahih Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ said that I've been commanded to perform sajda on 7 bones, right? So the forehead, both hands, both knees, and the toes of both feet. Now, when we look at the forehead and you have the nose as well, that's all included in the face. So the first one is included in the face. But otherwise, you could class the parts of the body that we do sajda with to be 8. So you have the forehead, and you have the nose, and then you have both hands, and you have both knees, and then you have the toes of both feet. It's important when doing sajda that the forehead is properly resting on the ground. And this resting of the forehead on the ground means that the hardness of the ground can be felt. So if somebody did not firmly place their forehead on the ground, then the sajda will not be valid. If you are performing sajda on something soft, then this will be interpreted and understood to be that you press down so much that you cannot press down the forehead anymore. And because the forehead does not properly rest on some spongy sort of materials, then sajda will not be valid. Salah will not be valid if you perform sajda on them, because your head will not rest against the ground. So this was the fifth fard action of salah. And the sixth is that after the last qa'dah, al-qa'datul akhira, the last sitting in which you recite at-tahiyyat, this is the sixth fard action of salah. So you'll notice that we're saying the word al-qa'datul akhira, the last sitting. So if you're reading a 4 rak'ah salah or a 3 rak'ah salah, then the first qa'dah is not fard. And that is wajib, inshallah, which we'll be discussing when we discuss the wajibat of salah. So the last qa'dah is fard. And the time, the duration in which one is to sit is the duration for the recitation of tashahhud. Because people often forget and don't understand the difference between the last qa'dah being fard and the first qa'dah being wajib, when forgetfulness occurs, they are confused. Inshallah, when we discuss the first rak'ah being wajib, we'll mention some examples of that. But in terms of the last qa'dah, the situation is what the situation is with that, we will also mention next time, so that you understand when we're talking about wajibat. But basically, what you should remember for today is that the last qa'dah is fard, and without it, the salah will be invalid. In terms of mistakes that people make in relation to that, that will be dealt with along with the discussion about the first qa'dah. And the seventh fard is khuruj bisun'ihi, leaving the salah by deliberately doing an action that will take you out of salah. This is fard. So it's necessary to make intention to leave the salah and do something that will take you out of salah. And that is basically by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, both sides. But there's a technical reason why we're wording it like this, and that inshallah will be understood when we discuss the wajibat of salah. That's what's wajib in salah. So summarizing today's discussion, we discussed the last two conditions that we still had to discuss from last time, and we discussed the 7 fard actions of salah. So it's important for us to make note and remember and memorize these things. So you basically set these out as pillars of salah. Now without these pillars, the structure of salah will not even be there. So even if one of them is missing, the salah will be invalid. So the first recitation of Allahu Akbar, the takbir tahrima, that is fard. And the second is to stand up, right? Qiyam. So you just remember that generally as qiyam, but there's details about in which rakats is necessary to stand, right? In terms of nafil, it's not necessary to stand in nafil, but that does not mean that it's not good to stand. It's more virtuous to stand up in nafil. The salah that's performed sitting down, the nafil that's performed sitting down, is half in reward in comparison to the nafil that's performed standing up. So you have takbir tahrima, you have qiyam, standing up, you have qira'ah, recitation of the Holy Quran, and that means reciting one ayah, at least one ayah of the Holy Quran from in every single rak'ah of salah, apart from the last rakats after the first two in the fourth rakat. So, and either the third or the fourth. In the third and fourth, it is not fard to recite the Holy Quran. But apart from that, in every other rakah, is fard to recite this one ayah of the Holy Quran. So you got takbir, tahrima, qiyam, qira'ah, and then ruku, bowing down, and prostration, going down into sajda, and both sajdas are fard, and qa'da akhira, the last sitting down, and the seventh is khuruj bisun'ihi, leaving with deliberate intention. So these are the seven faraid, and inshallah next time we'll be discussing the wajibat of salah, the actions that are wajib in salah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the tawfiq to discuss them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all harm and calamities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all of those who have passed away, uh, from those who are related to us and from those who are not related to us from the Muslimin. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them a high place in Jannatul Firdaus, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with true Iman and protect us from those actions which cause danger to our iman, and those words and those thoughts that cause danger to our iman. Amin bijahi Nabi al-Kareem. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.